Good morning, everybody. Meteorologist Jim Dickey here with another edition of Tropics Talk. Early on this Tuesday, June the 8th. Nothing going out there, but as you've probably heard if you follow any meteorologists in tropical areas on social media, there is an area that we'll be keeping an eye on as we head through the next couple of days. Far Southern Caribbean. Our last edition, we talked about this, that models were pinpointing sometime this week something would try to come together. There's nothing out there right now, but going forward through the next couple of days, we're likely going to see an area of low pressure form in this location that, as it drifts to the north and west, will have a chance to become at least a tropical depression, if not our next name storm of the season. So it's a low chance for the hurricanes. That in their latest update, they put that at 30% chance. If it did take a name, it would be Bill. Now, there's plenty of questions before we get to whether or not this is even going to happen. But as it moves to the north and west, note what's in its way, all of Central America. So I think the number one question with this, does the land keep this from even coming together? Is this just a weak disturbance that brings a lot of heavy rain across Central America, perhaps in the Bay of Campeche, and that's it? The water's definitely warm enough to support something trying to come together. As we talked about in previous editions as well, one of the few spots where waters are warm enough to support something tropical forming is the Caribbean this time of year. We look for waters above 78 degrees. And now the southern Gulf of Mexico, too, is in that range. So yes, as something forms in the South Caribbean and tracks to the north and west, water's warm enough to support that trying to come together. And basically what we're watching happening here is something called the Central American gyre taking hold. We usually see this pattern a couple of times this season. In fact, going back to last October and November, this sort of pattern was responsible for multiple storms forming, including both Eta and Iota. Not gonna see anything that strong, thankfully, as we're early in the season. But basically, you get broad easterly winds on the southern flank of the strong high-pressure area in the central Atlantic, and then you get broad westerlies south of Central America. Well, that's providing a broad counterclockwise flow, and that's sort of the way low-pressure areas spin in the northern hemisphere. So it's sort of a breeding ground for low pressure. You get that broad spin to sort of condense itself. Now you have a localized low pressure area, and from that you can try to develop a tropical system. And it's very much in line with what climatology says for the month of June as far as tropical systems forming. Note, homing in on the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Atlantic, and note sort of the common tracks that storms take out of the South Caribbean. Oftentimes we get this Central American gyre to set up into June, perhaps in early July. You get those storms forming in the South Caribbean. They move their way northward. Cristobal, a storm I think of last year, Colin a couple of years ago, Alberto a couple of years ago, all sort of this same thing. A weak disturbance that forms in the South Caribbean, moves into the Gulf, comes together. They're usually pretty sloppy. They usually just produce some heavy rainfall, but you can occasionally get a weak hurricane to spin up in this type of setup. Now, I've been pointing to this for a week now, too. Of note, when you look at the European ensemble forecast, it tends to develop whatever lobe of that low pressure forms up in the Pacific rather than the Atlantic. You can clearly see that on this probability map showing you the chance for something to come together. This is by Monday and Tuesday is where that model is set. But that being said, when we do look at the European ensemble, and now we look at where each different member puts their central low pressure areas. Remember, an ensemble is just you're taking that model, you're tweaking a number of different ways and seeing how each one comes out. So you see just about each and every member now has low pressure in the western Gulf of Mexico. They also have something going in the eastern Pacific. So it's going to be interesting to see how this resolves itself, but at least the European keying in on something weak in the western Gulf, and emphasis on weak. You note the top corner where it shows the winds. It keeps everything down below 40 knots. We'd likely be talking a depression, perhaps a tropical storm in that scenario. Now, the GFS ensemble, this shows more of a track taking something right along the coast of Central America and Mexico, which would likely keep it from forming. But there's a few members that bring it more due north, giving it the chance to strengthen. So that's going to be a big thing to watch here as we head through the weekend into next week. Is this able to move northward, do the models key in on more of that solution rather than something that just drags the coast, produces some heavy rain, never gets a name? So again, we'll be keeping an eye on it. I think for our purposes here in Florida, the good news is, for us anyway, this is going to stay in the western Gulf, but spots in Texas and Louisiana certainly don't need any more rainfall. So that's something we'll be watching closely. Does this exacerbate the ongoing flooding issues there? So yes, a low is going to form here in the next couple of days. A little bit of development, gradual development will be possible, especially if it's able to avoid land interactions with Central America. And in particular, we're going to be watching the Western Gulf. We could be talking a tropical depression, tropical storm in the Western Gulf of Mexico by sometime next week. Time frame middle to late week looks like the best chance that would be. And again, if it takes a name, that next name on the list would be Bill. That's the only thing going in the Atlantic right now. Of course, we'll be keeping a close eye on everything out there, not just today, but right on through hurricane season. Tune in this morning to More in the Morning, and of course, tune in tonight. Chief Meteorologist John Patrick, he'll have the latest on this system coming up. ABC 7 News, 6, 7, and 11. Till next time, this has been Tropics Talk. Hope you have a good day.